Me. Hello, everyone. How are you doing today? Thank you so much for joining us for our second campaign meeting of the season. For those of you who don't know Culture Action Europe or don't know me, I see a lot of familiar faces, but this is a public gathering, so I do want to welcome those who are new to our circle. My name is Maya Weisinger. I'm the communications head and head of community development at Culture Action Europe. And we are a network that bring together over 280 members and growing from 35 countries from Europe and beyond. And really, we are the first port of call for informed debate and opinion on cultural policy in Europe. And we are joined with other cultural networks, cultural organizations, community organizations, artists, researchers, all with the shared goal of putting culture at the heart of decision making. So we're very happy that you could join us today for our second edition of our campaign meeting under the umbrella of our Ask, Pay, Trust campaign. This is a campaign we launched last year that really is an overarching campaign focusing on centering the voices, input, and power of the cultural sector. So including artists' voices and cultural professionals' voices in decision making. The pay part, of course, to have fair remuneration in this work and to trust our sector's voice and our processes and the way that we think and move in the world. Part of that campaign is focusing now on the long-term European budget, the multi-annual financial framework, the MFF. And today we are here to learn more about where we are in the policy landscape and how we can move forward together in our advocacy work and what tools we might be able to give to you. That might be helpful in the work that you're doing as well. So I will let you know that we are filming today so that we are able to share this with others who want to use the resource to get more information and to share in their networks. So if you don't want your image to be shared on social media or on the website, you feel free to turn your cameras off. Otherwise, it's very nice to see all of your faces today. So I'll hand it over to Louisa, our head of policy, who will take it from here.
Thank you, Maya. Let me share my screen. 1 second. Can you see me? Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Perfect. So hello and welcome to this session where we will delve into the exciting intricacies of the EU budget. Last time we held a similar session was in July after the Commission had published its first MFF proposal. To remind you, today we're talking about the EU's next long-term budget that will cover the years from 2028 to 2034. The future of EU funding for culture will depend on it. There is a long period preceding the adoption of the budget and three main EU institutions that make decisions. So the European Commission that prepared the first proposal, then the European Parliament that represents EU citizens, and the Council of the European Union representing national governments of member states. They all need to agree on this proposal. In summer, we had the first proposal of the Commission, which was not bad for the cultural sector. We have a quite visible and autonomous Creative Europe culture strand as part of the broader AgoraEU program with a budget of 1.8 billion euros for the culture strand. That's doubling compared to what we have now, or a 71% increase if taken into account inflation. Now we're entering the phase where the Parliament and the Council need to react to the Commission's proposal. Today, we will discuss how we as civil society can influence this process. We prepared a roadmap for you that my colleague Reese will present later, and also a useful toolbox with concrete actions you can take. But before that, let me grab your attention for 10 to 15 minutes to explain in detail what Culture Action Europe thinks about the budget proposal and what can be improved. This is the main content that we are communicating in various forms to both the Council and the Parliament, and it's worth focusing on it. So as I said, the culture strand doesn't look too bad. As we recently discussed with members of the European Parliament, it could have been worse. However, here's what could be improved. First of all, we need to earmark funding for the Creative Europe Culture Strand in AgoraEU. It means that in the legal base, in the regulation, we want to see a concrete percent or of the program or a concrete figure fixed for the Creative Europe Culture Strand. If it's not ring-fenced, it means risks of this money being allocated to other strands in the future. When talking about the next budget, the Commission always mentions flexibility, but the reverse side of flexibility is that money can be pulled from one priority to another easily. We want to avoid that, so we're calling for a ring-fenced culture strands envelope in Article 11 of the draft regulation. Second, you might remember that we reported earlier that the culture strand preserved the main funding lines, such as cooperation projects, European platforms, network funding, etc. This assumption was based on the fact that these things were all listed in the objectives of the program, which means there is a very good chance these funding lines will appear in the next program indeed. At the same time, some of you rightly pointed out that burdens changed slightly, networks are mentioned in a bit differently. So it would be good to have an annex listing all funding lines as in the current Creative Europe program, which would of course give us clarity and certainty. On that note, currently the annex has both horizontal funding lines where you can apply irrespective of your sector, and it has sectoral funding lines for music, for books and publishing, for heritage and architecture, and then there is also a very modest mention of other sectors, including tourism, fashion, and design. You might have heard that in the new proposal, sectoral actions are absent. And we already see some sectors advocating for putting it back. For example, several weeks ago, a coalition of over 20 music organizations, including our members, issued a statement which was calling, among others, to preserve music funding, music sectoral funding. We understand the position of the sectors and of the music sector in particular that doesn't want to lose the success, the achievements of Music Moves Europe. And at the same time, we understand the argument of the Commission that defends the non-sectoral approach to provide, again, greater flexibility in project selection and also to boost the diversity of cultural sectors that benefit from the program. Our Culture Action Europe's position is that if the program's budget is increased, it makes sense to retain this sector-specific actions, but at the same time extend them to cover other sectors, for example, visual arts and performing arts. I was exchanging with some assistants of some members of the European Parliament, and they also mentioned the need for a balance because, for example, music sector, great job, well done, but objectively, the program cannot highlight just one sector. And I think it's a very good lesson for our advocacy. We need to keep the whole ecosystem in mind. And if we want to keep the sectoral approach, let's lobby not as separate sectors like music or books or architecture, but as one cultural sector which is represented in its diversity. I just mentioned if the budget is increased. What do I mean here, and where do I see options to top up the proposed budget envelope for AgoraEU? If you look at the current Creative Europe program, you see that its 2.4 billion budget is composed of two parts. One is a regular financial envelope of 1.8 billion, and the other one is 600 million additional money that comes from the fines. The European Commission collects antitrust and competition fines and distributes them among 7 programs, including Creative Europe. In the new proposal, however, this mechanism is absent. All fines will go now to the flexibility instrument for emergency spending. However, we believe that digital fines that the Commission collects under the Digital Markets Act, Digital Services Act, and Artificial Intelligence Act should go to AgoraEU directly because of the negative effect of AI and tech rapid development on the cultural sector. We believe that this mechanism should be reintroduced in the next MFF. If the budget is increased, we can also consider additional funding lines under the culture strand. Those of you who follow Culture Action Europe's activity might remember that we had some of these ideas already in our MFF position paper at the beginning of the year, in February and in March. One idea is micro grants, 5 to 15,000 euros for first-time applicants, for emerging artists and cultural professionals to test ideas and cooperate cross-border. Another idea is acquisition support. So cultural institutions can buy or program European cultural works or artworks. And finally, an idea that emerged from our discussion paper towards the Culture Compass, the sector blueprint, is a rapid response scheme to protect artistic freedom and support artists at risk, similar to the media freedom rapid response mechanism, which exists now under the media strand. As we reported earlier, the new regulation also proposes lump sums as a default grant format in AgoraEU. So currently in Creative Europe, we mainly work with actual cost grants. Simply speaking, an actual cost grant gives you money for the real documented expenses that you've had during the project, like invoices, receipts. And a lump sum grant, on the other hand, gives you a fixed amount of money for completing, fulfilling agreed tasks or results. No need to show every receipt. And this is the simplification the Commission is talking about, and which we also welcome. However, there is one risk that we see. Since these lump sums eliminate the need for a detailed line-by-line budget breakdown, there will be less visibility into how funds are distributed. And we think that this could potentially lead to situations where staff involved in the project are not paid adequately, or where social security contributions and other fair employment conditions are not ensured. That's why, to mitigate this risk, we propose that beneficiaries could be required to sign a declaration of honor or endorse a code of practice or the EU Charter on Decent Working Conditions in the cultural sector, also another novelty in our sector blueprint. And by doing so, they will commit to fair pay and decent working conditions, and also describe the measures they intend to adopt. Similar solutions also exist under Horizon, under Erasmus. For example, in Marie Skłodowska-Curie action under Horizon, beneficiaries must ensure that the invited researchers enjoy the same standards and working conditions as local staff, and they also should apply the European Charter for researchers, and also the code of conduct for recruitment of researchers, and it's explicitly mentioned in their model grant agreement. Final remarks on AgoraEU, the future of Creative Europe desks. They are now funded under the gross sectoral strand, which is absent from the new proposal. Program desks in AgoraEU are seen as a cross-cutting and horizontal priority, and their funding shall be determined by their nature and scope. That's what the regulation says. It's a very mysterious phrase that does not explain much, and we know that desks are concerned. And also, although the Commission reaffirms that everything will be fine, we want to see this reflected in the legal base. And moreover, we will push for Creative Europe culture desks to remain separate from SERV national contact points, because, as you know, AgoraEU merges both the Creative Europe program and SERV has also its national contact points. Now, there exists the Creative Europe Program Committee. It is composed of representatives of 27 member states, and it provides an opinion. It has a say in the adoption of the Creative Europe annual work programs. is absent from the new proposal. So this mechanism is called comitology. It's absent from the new proposal, and we propose that the program committee should be maintained as part of the AgoraEU governance framework. Finally, we want greater visibility of the Creative Europe culture strand and require a culture strand logo beneficiaries to use this logo in their comms and promotions. Such a logo exists now for the media strand, and it's also gone from the new proposal, but it would be good to have it to allow the cultural sector communicate the program they benefit from. Now, if you remember our mantra and our policy formula, we want a strong cultural program plus culture funding in other programs. Currently, for example, culture benefits also from Horizon, from Recovery and Resilience Facility, European Regional Development Fund, then Interreg, Digital Europe, Single Market Program for Creative Industries, and many more. However, in the new proposal, many of the funding windows or pillars or clusters for culture in other programs are absent, and we need to fix that. Let's start with competitiveness. Currently, the European Competitiveness Fund, with funding of 410 billion euros, features 4 structural thematic windows. One for clean transition and industrial decarbonization, 2 health, biotech, agriculture, 3 digital leadership, and 4 security and space. As you see, none of them focuses on competitiveness and entrepreneurship in the creative economy, in the cultural and creative sectors. Cultural and creative industries are mentioned just once under the digital leadership window. So we propose adding a 5th window dedicated to cultural and creative sectors and industries as part of the European Competitiveness Fund. Same goes for Horizon Europe with 175 billion euros budget. Now we have cluster 2, culture, creativity, inclusive society, which is absent again from the new Horizon proposal. And since the Competitiveness Fund and Horizon Europe are interconnected, so the collaborative research pillar of Horizon will be managed under the Competitiveness Fund. They have a similar structure. If we add something to the Competitiveness Fund, it should be also mirrored in Horizon. And at the same time, there is another part of Horizon, which is of interest to culture, which is part to society. We want the legal base to explicitly cover culture-related research, artistic research, the democratic role of culture, safeguarding cultural heritage. So we want this mentioned in part to society of the Horizon Europe program. Finally, regional funding or the proposed national and regional partnership plans. I must warn you from the very beginning that this is probably the most controversial part of the proposal, of the Commission's proposal, because it merges agriculture funding and regional funding. And we know that some political groups in the European Parliament are already planning to reject this part of the MFF proposal concerning the national and regional partnership plans already on the 12th or 13th of November during the plenary session in Brussels. That's why we're trying to be cautious here. So when we ask for earmarking 2% of this funding pot for culture, we say national and regional partnership plans or any relevant cohesion of structural funding instrument in the next MFF. We say that the focus here should be on access to culture, cultural participation, preserving and promoting cultural heritage and diversity, and also investing in cultural infrastructure, right? So objectives that are slightly different in format from the ones supported by AgoraEU. We see an opportunity to earmark 2% for culture because, first of all, the regulation already suggests earmarking 14%, 1/4, for social objectives. And Also, a positive precedent was set during the COVID pandemic when almost 2% of the recovery and resilience facility was allocated to culture and creative sectors. However, based on the lessons learned during the pandemic, we also recommend introducing a set of guiding criteria for the use of this 2%. For example, member states must uphold artistic freedom, freedom of artistic expression, ensure the autonomy of cultural institutions. Then funding support should be geographically balanced and cover cultural operators across the country, both in urban and rural areas. Then these resources, allocated resources, should not be concentrated on a single or a few cultural beneficiaries. Instead, this support should target small and independent creators, cultural professionals, organizations, and then the bodies, institutions, and organizations that distribute this funding must also commit to social conditionality and provide fair pay and equitable remuneration for EU funding beneficiaries. So to sum up what we think about the next MFF proposal, while the Creative Europe culture strand in Agora EU is not bad, it will also, in our opinion, benefit from earmarking, from an annex with specific funding lines. It will benefit from being topped up with digital fines. It will benefit from social conditionality, clarity for Creative Europe desks, a dedicated logo, and also the program committee. If the budget is increased, we propose a more balanced sectoral approach and potential new funding lines. However, we see that the important battle is to secure culture funding in other programs. And namely, we want a dedicated culture component in both the Competitiveness Fund and in the Horizon Europe program. And we want 2% for culture in regional funding. Now that you know our position, I want to hand over to Rhys to tell us a little bit about where we are at the moment policy-wise and what the main milestones are. And it's also a good opportunity to present Rhys, probably for the first time for the general public, because he's our new advocacy officer who joined Culture Action Europe 1 month ago and has already become a very knowledgeable team member. So welcome, Rhys. The floor is yours, and I will share the screen now with a roadmap.
Okay, thank you for the very warm welcome, Louisa. And indeed, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you, and thank you for joining. So, as you heard, that was a lot of information, but very, very important information because this really does matter. So now that we have the background, well, where are we? What happens next? What can each of us do to try and change the current situation? Because it's important to remember that this proposal is just the first step in quite a long process that will take place over the next year, 2 years. So we've developed what we're calling this roadmap that will be accessible on our website. We will share it with all of you, which you can refer to hopefully help you, especially over the next 3 months. The reason I mention the next 3 months is because this is quite key to take action. So this document has about 3 pages of items to help you. First of all, there's background. It's basically a bit of information, what Louisa already said, but in the case you wish to share this with your members or your networks, this will hopefully give an idea as to what the Ask Pay Trust campaign is, why it's important, and some useful links. I'll then go on to the more important part I want to share with you, which is what happens now. So, as things stand, we are about to enter the negotiation period with members of the European Parliament in their committees deciding on how they feel about the proposals, with members of the Council, your representatives of the national governments, also getting together in various configurations to decide what they think about the current proposals, and then, of course, negotiations between the institutions to try and identify compromises, rooms for improvement, and so on. What that means is, as this is about to begin, now is the time to make our voices heard. So we've identified 4 key areas where each of us can contribute to try and make sure that the cultural ecosystem is heard and represented in these really important negotiations. First things first, the Council of the European Union. So it is now the time to try and contact our representatives of national governments to express our concerns and also to relay what we would like to see for culture in the next budget. So an important moment will be what we're expecting on the 17th of November, when the current presidency of the council, the Danish presidency, is releasing what they're calling a toolbox or a negotiating box. It basically will represent the first idea we have of some sort of proposal for a compromise between various positions. By that point, we'll have a rough idea of where people stand, particularly national governments, but we need to try and reach out to them before then. For that reason, we really recommend, ideally by the end of this month, to reach out to the relevant national ministers to raise our concerns and suggestions on the areas that Louisa have just highlighted. In relation to this, we've tried to develop some template letters that you can use as a source of inspiration if you wish to try and convey why it's important to make sure the culture is at the heart of the next EU budget. My colleague Louisa will talk a bit more about that later. So the first step is reaching out to representatives of national governments. At the same time as this, but also slightly later, is reaching out to members of the European Parliament. Remember that MEPs are our voices at the European level. They should represent our interests. The more of us who reach out to express our concern, the more likely it is that our voices will be heard. So specifically, we believe it's of value to reach out to specific committees that will be working very closely with the areas we've identified as key priorities. But there are also other MEPs, whether it's, for example, your national MEPs, or in general, MEPs that are supportive of the cultural ecosystem, to try to reach out to them to also highlight what we would like to see and how we think they could help the cultural sector in the next budget. So we would like to see this also over the next month, because really the European Parliament will have their committee meetings over the next 2 months to try and release their own reports and positions on what they want to see. This is the perfect time to influence them, because in about 6 months, 9 months' time, it's possible they will already have established their official positions and it'll be a bit more difficult to influence actually what they're trying to do. So now's the perfect time. So next, there are also a couple of additional steps that each of us can take. The EU, and the European Commission in particular, organizes regular surveys to try and seek public and stakeholder opinion on their various initiatives. Right now, there are a whole handful of surveys being carried out on the next EU budget. So any of us, whether it's as a citizen or as an organization or a network, can make our voices heard. You might think that, well, my voice isn't going to matter in a sea of voices, but actually it's quite the opposite, especially as we expect hundreds and hundreds of contributions to go to this survey. The more that these keywords appear, the more that culture appears actually does matter, whether it's because someone is hand by hand going through each of the contributions or they use algorithms to detect keywords. The more that culture comes up, the more we can make sure it stays as a priority. So please, if you have the time, follow the links here. There's a survey for culture, survey for competitiveness, where we can raise the concerns that Louisa has highlighted about the European Competitiveness Fund, about Horizon Europe. There is a survey for each of these things. So if you have the time, and your networks do too, please do consider completing them. And last but not least, there is always a value in getting more support for our campaign. So Ask, Pay, Trust is an ongoing campaign for a reason, and it's highly relevant to the priorities we've highlighted in the next budget. We have just over 1,900 endorsements right now, which we're really happy with, and I hope all of you in the call today have endorsed the campaign. If not, please go and endorse it. But the more we have, the merrier. If we reach across 2,000, for example, it's a lot easier and a lot nicer to be able to say more than 2,000 citizens have expressed their concern and supported our campaign than 1,912, for example. So please keep continuing to promote the campaign, and we appreciate your support. So to recap how we envisage this roadmap, by the end of the month, for those of you who are able to, and perhaps share with your networks, now's the time to contact your national representatives who will be the government representatives going to the council. We've prepared some template letters you can use as a source of inspiration, so please take a look. Secondly, please contact relevant MEPs who hopefully will help us in our battle to ensure that the cultural ecosystem is well funded and well represented in the next budget. The key dates you can see on screen: end of the month, try and contact national representatives, national ministers, and by mid-November, but the earlier the better, please contact MEPs. And in the meantime, in general, complete the surveys too, if you are able to. I will now hand back over to Louisa about how we can do that in a bit more detail, but I hope that gave you a good overview.
Thank you very much, Reese. Indeed, now we'll go in more detail regarding each of the points that Reese mentioned. First of all, lobby the council. We know that cultural attachés are in general in favor of AgoraEU. At the same time, it doesn't really matter if the heads of governments reject the MFF in total. We know that Germany, Finland, the Netherlands, Sweden, also Poland, Ireland, the Czech Republic, Hungary, also Italy, they rejected the Commission's proposal, either because the total MFF size is too big for them, 2 trillion euros, and they don't want to pay for it, or they are unhappy about new own resources, new taxes, for example, proposed by the European Commission. So we want you to reach out to your national ministers and ask them to add culture to the Competitiveness Fund, Horizon Europe, regional funding. Together with finance ministers, these respective ministers for economy, for research, for regional development, will have a say in the design of the thematic programs. That's why we prepared template letters that are already on our website and that need to be sent to your ministers by the 31st of October. We expect our regional Culture Action Europe's regional hubs to lead on this exercise and to involve not only other Culture Action Europe members in your country, but also other cultural organizations to co-sign. Some of you already did that in July, writing to your national finance ministers, and we were glad with the outcome. I think 7 hubs wrote the letters and gathered signatures. So we will write to the leaders of our national hubs, regional hubs, with instructions, but at the same time, also mobilize organizations outside your network, outside our network. And again, when it comes to the national and regional partnership plans, the Parliament opposes it, and some member state may oppose it. And in our version, we were very careful saying that we want 2% of the plans or alternative regional funding instruments to support culture, because sometimes in some member states, there might be even a tension between regional minister and finance minister or head of government. Then members of the European Parliament. So the European Parliament will also begin work on its position, which will take time. And as I told you, we already know that MEPs plan to reject part of the MFF proposal about the national and regional partnership plans. But before the final position on the MFF in its totality, the parliamentary committee, as Reese told us, the parliamentary committee responsible for the various funding programs will first draft and adopt their own positions, their own reports on each proposal. And there is no confirmed timeline for when the Parliament will adopt its overall position. Most likely it will be in 2026. But we already know that the relevant committees have started discussing the new programs, have started in exchanging with commissioners, for example, and the procedure files for their reports are already registered in the system. So it's very technical. It's a very technical thing, but I'll now explain it. So let's say you have the position, or you share Culture Action Europe's position, you have some amendments, and you want to present it to members of the European Parliament. How do you do that? You can write to 3 categories of members of the European Parliament. And here we prepared a table for you. First of all, and this is the most correct way, is to write to the rapporteurs of the files. So a rapporteur is the member of the European Parliament who's responsible for a particular file, for example, for the opinion on the AgoraEU program or Horizon Europe program. For example, the Cult Committee of the European Parliament will appoint its rapporteur for AgoraEU, or ITRE Committee, that is responsible for industry and research, will appoint its rapporteur for the Competitiveness Fund for Horizon Europe. So you write to these MEPs. We don't know who these MEPs are right now. They're not assigned yet, but this information will appear here. In the 3rd column, you see there are names of the programs with hyperlinks. So if you go to this link, you'll see the names of rapporteurs. So it's not there yet, as I told you, but it's worth monitoring. And of course, with Culture Action Europe are monitoring this process. And as soon as this information is available, we will share it again, and we will publish it in our decoder and in our newsletters. So write to these people. And you know the message. If you write in, for example, to the Regi rapporteur, ask for 2% for culture in the regional fund and pot. If you're writing to the Horizon rapporteur from ITRE, ask for the culture cluster in Horizon and in the competitiveness fund. Now, meanwhile, as we don't have info on rapporteurs, you can write to the chairs of relevant committees with the same requests. Just at the very beginning, outline clearly why you're writing to them. For example, we are writing to you in your capacity as chair of this committee, which will oversee this program, for example, Horizon program, European Competitiveness Fund, a program that we believe is also crucial to culture in the next MFF, and then outline your position. Or there is another category of members of the European Parliament. It's friends or allies for culture, or MEPs from your countries that you know, that you worked with. They may not necessarily be very actively involved with the MFF file, but you can still share your position with them. I'm writing to share with you our organization's position on the cultural funding in the next MFF. As we know, you have long been a strong supporter of culture, something like that. In many cases, you won't get a response. In some cases, if you're lucky, they might respond to you by saying that they are not in charge of the MFF file, but it's better to make your point rather than not to make it. And anyway, all these members of the European Parliament, they are participating in the process. They have their hearings, their meetings where they can ask questions to rapporteurs. So it's worth delivering and communicating our position to them. Whenever you write to members of the European Parliament, you can always ask for a meeting to clarify the position. And another thing, different members of the European Parliament are affiliated with different political groups. Bear in mind that there are groups that are pro-European, there are anti-European groups, there are far-right, left. So you decide your political position and how you get involved with the parties. We are not telling you whom to write or whom to avoid, but just bear in mind this political context behind members of the European Parliament. And again, yes, it would be good if you could fill out the MFF survey. It's the same survey we asked you to fill out before the MFF publication. So it was back in May. Now the Commission reopened it. So they reopened it again, asking stakeholders to provide feedback on the already published proposal. So there are several thematic surveys, MFF survey for culture, MFF survey for competitiveness, MFF survey for external action, MFF survey for regions. And each of these surveys, please share your relevant position. So you remember comments on the AgoraEU program in the culture survey, the need for dedicated clusters for culture in the European Competitiveness Fund and Horizon Europe in the competitiveness survey, then the call to earmark 2% for culture in regional funding in the regional survey. So you understand the principle. So you have like a message box and you deliver your messages in various formats to different stakeholders, just be it national ministers or members of the European Parliament. And finally, some tips. Let me reopen my slides for that. So some tips for your advocacy. Choose your battles wisely, invest your energy wisely. For example, we know that some stakeholders in the cultural sector are not necessarily happy with the name AgoraEU, but probably it's not the name of the program that we should be debating right now, given how intense and hard this negotiation process is. Look for opportunities to top up the budget. There is only so much we can do with 1.8 billion for the Creative Europe culture strand. So mainstream culture in other programs and lobby beyond the cultural bubble. Trade-offs between new conditionalities and reporting burdens. Whenever we are talking about, adding new conditionalities, be it social conditionality or green conditionality, keep in mind that at the end of the day, you will need to report on it. So understand what your priorities are. Keep future simplification in mind and what it might mean in practice and what we can do about it. I already shared this example about lump sum grants and the risks that we saw with fair pay for staff involved in the project. But for example, simplification will also mean more competition. Think about who and how will implement your proposal, because again, we are used to generating many policy papers, position papers with different ideas, but it's always worth looking into the legal base, exploring the already existing opportunities and how your proposal can be implemented in practice. And please remember that new proposals come at the cost of existing opportunities. So that's why when we have our 3 new ideas for new funding lines as part of the AgoraEU an acquisition program, funding for newcomers, and then artistic freedom protection, we say that we advocate for these funding lines to be added only if the budget is increased. So you have the timeline, right? As Reese mentioned, you know what to do. So I will stop now. I know it's a lot of information, and you can find all these useful template letters, this presentation, our roadmap on our website, and also the recording will be available there. And now I would like to hand over to Maya also to share her comms perspective and a little bit more about the toolbox that we prepared.
Thank you, Louisa. And before I continue, I do want to make a big public thank you to Louisa and Reese, who have prepared these documents for you, but also have taken quite the time and effort to present it in a way that it can be super useful and helpful for us to understand how to move forward together and in a timely way, and to also give us an understanding of of where we are in the overall MFF timeline, because I think that's super useful to all of our work. So thank you for preparing that. And I will show you more on our website just to give you a very tangible look of how to find this information and where to turn to when you want to know more or get more details. I see that I'm maybe lagging. Can you all see me and hear me okay?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, so there's maybe a bit of a delay, but you'll get the information. So I'm going to share my screen just to walk you through where to find the information. Um, so you should be able to see our beautiful website. It might be coming up. And I apologize, I do have a big lag on my side all of a sudden. So yes, you see our website and you can immediately go to our actions. This is us, the fungi down here. And once you enter our campaign, I think many of you are already familiar with this part of our website, but I did want to just take the moment to direct you to it and walk through a bit. I mean, this is the landing page, but we also have what I think would be most helpful, especially following this conversation, is the Take Action tab, where you can then see all of the information that was presented today is here. So the roadmap that Reese and Louisa just walked us through is available already on the website. And as well as those template letters to the competitiveness and research ministers and regional ministers are here. And within those letters, I'm not sure if it will actually show you. Hopefully you can see this as well. No, okay. You can see it on your own when you download these for your own processes. There is also step-by-step instructions within each of those files to really give you, yeah, to kind of give you an easier take on how to proceed. So you can download those already from the website here. You can also take a look at our previous templates just to get a sense of what happened in July, and we may in the next few weeks have an update to these, so you can also download those as well. The recordings to this meeting and our previous campaign meeting are also here, so you can already see our Culture Compass campaign meeting that we had a few weeks ago. That's already available, so if you'd like to check that out, it's there, and the recording from this meeting will be updated sometime this evening. And then we have resources if you would like to uh, share your endorsement of the Ask Pay Trust campaign. We have logos, banners, all within a campaign pack here. So you're very welcome to all of the images you might need and in different languages as well. Now, a note on that, and now I'm kind of stuck. Let's see. I do have a template that you can also create your own, but we would love to share it with others who might need the correctly translated uh, logo. So feel free to email it to me. On that note, I also wanted to say that when you do write your letters, we can also share them on our site so that others who would need letters in the same language that you are writing your letter can access it, can also see what you've written if you are willing to share. So we can also use this as an open share space for advocacy tools that are being used in your own regions or in your own national context. So we'd love to offer the space up in that way as well. And in also on that note, if there are other tools that you think would be helpful in your advocacy work that might also be helpful across the network in the work that we're doing, really feel free to reach out to me. I mean, we're very open. It's not just us in the office who are running this campaign, it's also for you and for the network to make best use of our resources and how we can share across each other. So if there are certain things that would be helpful, you can see maybe, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you have a creative idea and you would love to share it, and it's something that we can do. I'd love to have that conversation. So please, the lines are open if you have any requests. There's also some ideas around how you can organize if you're perhaps wanting to have a letter writing session and you want a number of people in the room. We also have the templates, but we can also have a physical endorsement sheet. So, of course, we have a digital page where you can endorse a campaign, but you're also very welcome with this sheet to um, collect physical signatures and then submit them to us that way. And that we also have a GDPR statement that allows us to add it to the digital campaign. So there's some ideas there if you'd like to check that out. And we have a few accessibility resources now, as far as easy read versions of the demands of the campaign and the audio version. But of course, if you know anyone or yourself need any resources that could make our campaign more accessible and reach more people, please reach out to me and I'm very happy to speak with you and figure out how we can make that happen. So I just wanted to walk you through a bit for those who haven't seen it. One last thing is we also have a news section specifically for the campaign. And this is also a place where we'd love to share the work that you're doing, especially moving towards MFF. We can consider this a centralized hub for campaign updates. So, I mean, for instance, we have the music sector's call here. So if there's anything you'd like to share, especially as we have ongoing campaigning, we can also use our channels as a way to broadcast that. So keep that in mind too as you move forward. That's all from me, but I also now will take the time to open it up for any questions. It could be questions about the resources, but it could also be questions to Louisa and Reese. If anyone has anything, feel free to raise your hand. I see Marco first and then Katarina right after.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And first of all, congratulations for all this work because you did wonderfully everything, and especially Luisa and Riz. I think you explained pretty well what's going on. I have three questions and I'll be quick and you see how to answer it. And if you want to answer more in depth later on this by email, you can, don't worry. So the first one is about the level of granularity in which when we delve into a proposal for the MFF, the question is how much in depth we can go with our proposals and the technicalities. And that's open to discussion. The second is about, and I might have missed it in what you presented, but I'm wondering why you're not addressing, and I repeat, I might have missed it, the Global Europe envelope. Why are you thinking of not addressing this specific envelope? Because I'm giving you an example for cultural heritage. We are definitely thinking of involving ourselves in these negotiations. And the third thing about the resources and the thing coming from all the networks and or NGOs. That's great. That's great news that we're going to have a space to publish and to interact with this. It would be awesome to have some kind of tags or something that from with which we can skim through it, because the most important part for us having this type of space is to go through these kind of proposals and see, okay, this organization is proposing something that is similar to what we want to do. So maybe we can join forces. So that's something that maybe could be done. I know on a technical level, these kind of things and tags and they might be a little bit more difficult, but it's an idea that could be implemented. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. So first question about the level of granularity. Choose the level you're most comfortable with. For example, with Culture Action Europe, we have very detailed, concrete technical amendments to different articles of different pieces of legislation. And when communicating with attachés or with members of the European Parliament, we will be submitting very concrete proposals and amendments. Also bearing in mind that they are armies of lawyers that will change the burden most likely, but we would like to show them our vision, some concrete hooks that we can use in adopting our proposals. At the same time, if the organization, for example, doesn't feel very comfortable submitting very concrete and detailed amendments, it could be a really high-level call for culture cluster in Horizon without addressing specific articles where this cluster should be referenced. So whatever is comfortable for you. And of course, we provided template letters for national ministers, and you'll have a look at them and you'll see that you can take content from those letters and also use it in your letters to MPs. But at the same time, try to diversify a language a little bit and adopt it to your organization's, I don't know, position or specificity. A very good question about Global Europe Fund, indeed. We also want to mainstream culture in the Global Europe Fund. The thing is, we're still thinking about how to do that. Because if you look at the Global Europe regulation right now, in the annexes, you'll see many references for culture. All the regional programs as part of the Global Europe Fund have culture-related objectives. We are now trying to understand how to proceed further, because if we're talking about the Competitiveness Fund and Horizon Europe, there is a very clear cluster structure, and we can say add cluster here, add a policy window here. We can't say that with the Global Europe Fund, because the program is focused on regions, not thematic clusters. At the same time, in discussions with some of our partners and with UNIC in particular, we also see that it's a matter of governance when it comes to the Global Europe Fund. Because, okay, it's great that we have culture objectives in annexes, then how to make sure that these objectives are translated into specific calls for culture projects as part of the Global Europe Fund. It's also a matter of governance. It's a matter of some internal processes and interinstitutional cooperation within the Commission. It's a matter of work programs, and we're still thinking how to address that. And that's why we haven't prepared a letter yet, but also if you have a position, if you know how to address it from your perspective, obviously go ahead. Yeah, and the last question, I think it was more to yeah.
It might have been, but I don't remember what it was. Can you
It was about the taxes, less of a question and more a proposal.
yeah. Yes. No, that's a great idea. I mean, I think also once we start, and I hope that people are feeling engaged and motivated to also share whatever they are putting out there. And then, of course, I think there's a good way that we can also just one-on-one make those connections and see who has shared things and make sure that people are aware of what's happening across the network. But yes, for sure, let's find a way to organize it in a way that's helpful for people to access what they need, definitely. And it will become clearer as you all start sharing with us what you are writing. Thanks, Marco.
And I saw Katarina's hand. Yeah.
Yeah, I took it down initially because my question would also have been about Global Europe. But yeah, first of all, thank you for the, as always, excellent work. Maybe just to add to the Global Europe question, I was also wondering about that. And I also saw that culture is mentioned quite a lot in these regional programs. And from kind of the quick glance I had over it, it also seemed like that this was also really from the perspective of cultural diversity, intercultural dialogue, and less the just promoting European culture abroad kind of perspective. So I don't know if then earmarking funds or whatever is maybe something you had thought of already. But maybe then I'll just add another question on Erasmus. Kind of if you have a point of view on that proposal with the slight bit of restructuring they have done. I think maybe you mentioned before that Culture Action Europe joined also now some kind of, I don't know if it's Erasmus Alliance, I forgot what it's called, what their position is on the proposal. Anything specific we should be on the lookout for there. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Katharina. And yeah, great. If you have any additional ideas regarding the Global Europe Fund and some, I know, earmarking, focusing on certain aspects that are not highlighted there, please share them with us. We will be very glad to incorporate them also in our position. When it comes to Erasmus, that's something that we had discussions about, but we haven't come up with a particular position on how to mainstream culture there, because currently we are focused on big programs where we saw that there were precedents in the past, like Cluster 2 in Horizon or Competitiveness Fund merges, I don't know, Digital Europe, Single Market program that also had calls for probably not culture, but creative industries. So we focused on big programs where we saw that there were precedents and that where we see that it's more feasible to lobby at the point. At the same time, also when it comes to Erasmus, it's also I don't know, a matter of like internal governance and looking into the internal structure and finding some opportunities for culture, which are already there. So it's less evident as in with the Global Europe Fund. But at the same time, we'll definitely keep looking into other programs. And for example, Reese has been working on the European Social Fund. Now I see your hand raised. Probably you could tell a couple of words about the European Social Fund and Erasmus if you have something to share.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight briefly that this is a work in progress. So thank you for highlighting Erasmus Plus, because indeed, as Louisa alluded to, the current framework already has many references to culture and intercultural exchange. And of course, we're aware of how it's being merged with the European Solidarity Corps, and that also has its own implications. So this is something we're following. It's not something that's being discarded. It's more of a case of, out of the current programs that we looked into, these are the ones that we prioritize today for really urgent reaching out, because it's completely absent in some cases. And so that's what we prioritize. But this is something we'll be working on. If any of you do have any suggestions, very much open and welcome. And indeed, there are other programs like the European Social Fund, as was mentioned here. We do see potential in trying to introduce perhaps more explicit mentions for culture. As things stand, there is no mention directly of culture in the proposal for the European Social Fund, but there is an implicit objective via the overarching framework in one very brief objective. So, sometimes, let's say, the current language is suboptimal, but there is a path that we're trying to analyze and follow. And as and when we have new ideas, we'll present them to you. And please, if any of you have any advice or suggestions, we're all ears.
Thank you, Reese. And just to add on top of that, as you might have noticed, this roadmap covers the period until the end of this year mainly. So we plan to have another campaign MFF meeting probably in January or in February, also to have and to share updates. Yes, Katharina.
Sorry, I promise not to keep anyone longer than necessary. I just remember one thing is I think the guarantee facility, that's all now combined in the competitiveness fund, correct? Right? And the suggestions you have made, that would kind of also connect with that sort of in a way, right? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very interesting story about cultural and creative sectors loan guarantee facility, which was under Creative Europe in the previous program. Then it became part of the InvestEU, but not as a separate standalone budget line, let's say, but something based on the demand. And now InvestEU, it's also part of the European Competitiveness Fund. So yeah, we are also looking into that. Okay, we will activate the French hub for the 2 letters. Great, Marcos. Thank you. And once you activate them, please keep them activated for potential other letters to other ministers.
All right. Are there any other questions? I see that we're a bit over time, so I also want to be mindful of your this break that we're having in the middle of the day to take for our campaign meeting. Let's say this, if you do have questions, reach out to Culture Action Europe. We're very happy to speak with you and follow up with you if there is anything that you would like to know about what was presented today. Of course, the materials will be shared on our website, and expect to see something more publicly shared on Friday as well. If you are not already receiving our newsletters, please do subscribe, and you will start to see all of the information come directly to your inbox as well. I want to thank Reese and Louisa again for all of the really amazing work, and for supporting all of us across the sector in this very important advocacy moment that we're having. And for those of you who joined us, thank you for your time and your attention, and for, yes, putting all of your effort into this campaigning work as well, and each of the things that you're doing. So thank you from Culture Action Europe, and we will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.